Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are, and welcome to this next video in the series on karma. Today we'll be looking at the karma of speech. In the previous videos, we've started to get the idea of karma, how it is the natural outcome of what we are and what we're doing. We've started to think about who we are, and last time in particular, about being embodied. Once we have a body, the demands it makes on us, the nature of the body, and we live in a world of other people and other beings with their bodies. We saw the good karma is how to protect their lives, to help them in every way, physically, how to respect their bodies, how to respect their property, which is like an extension of themselves, of their bodies, and how the opposite, harming them physically, harming them psychologically, sexually, stealing their property, cheating, is not only something that's horrible to do, but something that brings back on us very unwanted and unpleasant results. So it's to be avoided at all costs. Today we turn our attention to speech. As I mentioned earlier in one of the previous videos, it's an amazing ability we have to express our thoughts and ideas to each other, to communicate in many ways. We want to use it nobly, well, to bring only goodness to each other, and through the power of karma, goodness back to ourselves. Now, through making good karma and building up that kind, warm strength of karma in this life, and through bringing back the karma of good speech in future lives. Some people don't realize the power of speech, or the power of speech, karma. In the English language, there's a very famous expression: sticks and stones may break my bones, but words can never hurt me. Of course, words can't hurt the physical body, but words can very much hurt people, and sometimes they can hurt much more than physical things. Sometimes physical injuries can be overcome and pretty much forgotten. But the unkind words, the deluding words that cheated and spoilt one's life, the lies, the wasted time, these things can hurt very much, and it's precisely because they can cause so much damage that they can make very strong karma if it's good words, the words of a wise teacher. Sometimes just a few words can change our whole life and bring so much goodness, save so much trouble. What a wonderful, powerful karma that is. But sometimes the harsh words can have such an impact. So let's explore this a little bit. Technically, we have 4 key areas of speech. So of unvirtuous karma of speech and their opposites, 4 areas of virtuous karma of speech. So let's see what they are, so we can remember in the future the list very easily. We have lying, divisive, if you like, divisive speech, hurtful speech, and useless speech. Lying, divisive speech, hurtful speech, and useless speech. These are the non-virtuous karmas. Their opposites are telling the truth, speech which makes friendship and harmony, healing speech, and useful speech. As always, we start with the not so good ones, the non-virtuous karmas, because they're the ones we must avoid at all costs, at all costs. With speech, I think we have a very interesting area of work. You see, the physical side is more tangible. And in a way, people can take it more seriously. And it won't be that many people who are murderers, who are physically violent, who are rapists or thieves. Somehow it's much more clear-cut, and we live in a society where those things are punished. So it's also in the common mentality. But from my own experience, of myself, of course, and all the Buddhist people I meet, I can see that through habits picked up from the world in which we live, through our own habits, we can somehow let our speech run away from us, say untrue things, say unkind things, waste people's time with rubbish, useless speech. It tends to go much less noticed or not to be taken so seriously as physical karma. I'll go through the technical details briefly. There's more in the books, of course. The first one is lying, and I can't get into that subject without remembering some advice from Akong Rinpoche. Once he said, "Do you think it's easy not to tell lies?" And I said, "Well, not that hard." And he said, "Really?" He said, "Not to tell lies. First you need to know the truth." Very good example of good speech, because I remember it today, and it's been a very, very useful teaching. So simple, a few words, still working on it years later. So, lying. When we consider lying, we consider it and all the other areas of speech under three headings, but they're not the same three headings in each type of wrong speech. So with lying, the first type of lies are called either big lies, that's the easy title. Sometimes they are called Lama's lies. Here we're looking at the worst sort of harmful speech. This is the speech of false gurus. That's why it's called Lama's lies. They can be totally false, or they can be good lamas who with time go wrong because their ego gets the better of them. Once one's in a position of being admired by people, turned to by them for advice, it's very easy not to want to say no, to always want to look good, to always have an answer. So they start making up the Dharma or pretending that they have more realization than they do, answering questions as though they have the wisdom and the experience, which they don't. So this is what we are looking at here. The reason it is such a terrible karma is because it misleads many people. Misleads. It leads them in the wrong directions. The repercussions of what's coming out of here may deceive tens, hundreds, sometimes thousands of people. So the repercussions are enormous. It colours all those people's lives and their own karmas, their own actions. But in particular, Dharma is the greatest treasure we have. It's the way out. The truth the Buddha gives us is a lifeline. So much effort has been put into keeping it pure and useful and true over the centuries that to corrupt that is a terrible thing. Terrible thing. It makes for confusion, it makes for wrong practice, wrong ideas, all sorts of things. So the Lama's lies are the worst. The second type of lying is lying where there is really the intention to deceive. It's self-centered, it's selfish. One's deceiving others for one's own profit, for one's own image, for whatever it may be. Self-interest, dark self-interest. And so one tells lies, one weaves a web of lies. We find this a lot in life. And once the lying starts, then to support the first lies, you need to tell more lies. We see so many instances in couples where one partner is cheating on the other, and then they have to tell lies to cover up their activity, and more lies. So intentional lying is the second sort. The third sort is sort of low-key lying. It means that what is coming out of here is non-truth. It's confused, but there isn't a dark intention behind it. So in a way, a lot of worldly speech is like that. If one listens to what people are saying, listens to conversations, so much of it is untrue, poorly informed. But nevertheless, it happens. Lying, and especially the Lama's lying, can have terrible karmic consequences. Hundreds and hundreds of lives in the lower realms. It can take you to the very lowest of the realms, the most psychotic of states, for a long, long time. So even though it is just speech, it is so powerful, and the key is powerful because of its effect on others. That way we can understand how just words, these sounds which in themselves, in other places we see their voidness, they're like echoes, but nevertheless the impact can be very strong, and this gives us a clue to how lying can be a terrible karma. The opposite is, of course, to tell the truth. If somebody is a Dharma teacher, they need to be able to say, I don't know. They need to be able to say, this is what the books say, but I don't have the realization. All those sorts of things. To only say what they are sure the Buddha said, what is definitely the Buddha's teachings from reliable sources. That way the thread of truth passes purely through the ages, and it is a very powerful, virtuous karma. The second sort of wrong speech is divisive speech. It's where we set people against each other. A terrible thing to do, because once people are against each other, there's no telling what can happen. It can go on for generations in family feuds. And again, it's just words, it's sounds in space. But when if we look back at Hitler, those speeches that fired up a whole nation, that were part of the process of World War II. If we look at the hate today that can be behind terrorism in our society, separating one group of people from another, racial hatred and all sorts of things, the repercussions of speech, and especially the speech of those in authority and in power, can be tremendous. When we look at this divisive speech, we see three sorts. It can be done directly. That means the people are there. So in their presence, you say things that set them against each other, make them feel bad against each other, turn them into enemies, destroys any sweetness between them. The second way is not in their presence, but you get other people to do it for you. So it's the same thing, but you're not there, but you get other people to do it. The third is one step away again. It's the same process. You're making people not like each other. You're separating them, separating families, separating couples, or whatever it may be. But there you do it very indirectly. Not just going getting somebody to do it, but subtly. These days it could be through messages in social media, through spreading rumors and so on. It's much more subtle, but your intention, your hope is that people will turn against each other. When we come more generally to karma, we can see that we don't just get karma from what we do, but what we call it rejoice in. Rejoice in what other people do. So as you're watching the TV, listening to the news, sometimes we are glad when people turn against each other, hurt each other. In a way, we also get the karma as if we'd made it happen. But that's another story, we'll come back to it. It's just to give you the feel of this karma of speech. Speech that separates people. Again, because it can cause such trouble, it can cause people to hurt each other. If we look at racial hatred, national hatred, religious hatred, and so on, wars, then people kill each other. It leads to all sorts of things. So it's very much up there with the very worst of karmas. It can take you to the lowest states, the lower realms, for many, many, many lifetimes. We must avoid it. Be very careful and mindful with speech to think, is what I'm saying now, is it going to bring harmony to the people listening or the people who afterwards are going to hear reports of what I've said? Or is it going to bring people together? Of course, the opposite of divisive speech is the healing speech that repairs, that brings friends together, that reconciles. It's called reconciling speech. Either on a local level inside our family, bringing our brothers and sisters, parents and children back together again. It can be in our local society, trying to calm down the tensions between the groups in our own village or street. It can be work on a national level to help reduce racial hatred and so on. Bringing harmony is very, very good karma. It's a very noble thing to do. It's what we should all be doing in these times when there is so much blame and hatred. The third type of wrong speech is hurtful speech. And here this is when we use this gift of communication, of truth and harmony, when we use it as a weapon. It's a horrible, terrible thing to do. I've done it. I hope not, but I'm pretty sure you've done it sometimes too. When we want to hurt the other, and we know the power of words. And the worst thing is, we can hurt those we've loved the most, because we know them. We know how to get to them. We know their secrets, their weaknesses, and it's like a knife that can go right to the heart. Although it's just sounds, it's voidness. Worse than a knife, because a knife wound, if it doesn't kill, can be healed. You go to the hospital, maybe 2 years later, there's just a little scar left. But wounding speech can leave scars that last a whole lifetime, that sour one person's life. We need to be so mindful with speech that it never hurts. So the way we can consider wounding speech is, again, first directly, you're there with somebody and you actually say things to hurt. Intentionally, you want to hurt them. Secondly, we can do it with a sort of a close indirectness through somebody else, send a message, write a letter, or we can do it much more indirectly by just letting rumors go and knowing that in the end, indirectly, you're going to hurt the person through the ideas, through what you say, through the ideas you spread, you make circulate. Again, with social media, with our modern ways of communications, there are many ways of doing this. The point is, you want somebody to hurt. And if we come back to this idea of rejoicing in, then when we see somebody get hurt, put down, even though we didn't make the speech or make the rumor, if we're glad that a person is hurt by what's being said about them, there is something wrong there. It means we don't have enough understanding. We don't have enough compassion. So the opposite of the wounding speech is to think of this power of your tongue and your voice box as being like medicine, like a healing machine. What comes out of it should only bring healing. And especially if one can, the healing of the Dharma advice, the long-term advice that doesn't just repair the wound but makes somebody stronger, able to cope. The final type of wrong speech is called useless speech. It's when we waste this ability. And we have a very good indicator of this in some of the best Buddhist masters I've known. One finds a power of speech. First, people listen to them when they speak. They take notice. They take it seriously. Secondly, they have a power in a few words to say something that you'll remember 20, 30 years later. You can still hear them saying it. My own teachers, I can hear them saying those key words of advice that I've received. They have the power of speech because for so many lifetimes they've used their speech, used it well, usefully, efficiently. So this is useless speech. When we waste the power of this, we destroy the karma of speech. Which means that in future lives, people won't take us seriously. Even if we say wise, true things, nobody's interested. Nobody remembers what we've said. We lose the power of speech and communication. So we look at useless speech under 3 headings again. The first one is the wrong, useless speech. Bit of a delicate area, because here we're looking at the religious speech of other faiths. We're not condemning all of them. It's very pragmatic. It's very real. Let me put it simply. If you are praying to somebody that being or that person gives you something, and that being doesn't exist, it's like praying to a stone. It's like praying to a flower that can't give you what you're asking for. And then back in India, in the Buddha's time, there are faiths that have their mantras and their prayers. So the prayers are praying to somebody, to a god, asking them to give what they can't give. And then the mantras are just mumbo jumbo. It sounds in the hope of a reward, but it is just wasting the power of speech. As I said, this is a delicate area. We need generally, it's the Buddha's teaching, all of our present-day lamas' teaching, to respect each other, respect each other's beliefs and faiths. But when we look here, simply technically, simply in terms of karma and what we're doing? Are we wasting, saying useless things that can't deliver? Are we praying to someone who's not there, an imaginary friend, for something that can't happen? We need to think about this a lot. So the problem there is that when people are entrenched in a religious belief, it's very strong. It overrides everything else. Very hard for them to change their minds and get out of it. We're certainly not trying to go in there and convert people. So we realize what a kind of a hole you can dig yourself into with this wrong speech, religious ideas, God ideas, and so on, if they don't correspond to what's really there. Some people can use words like God or the words of other religions, and it corresponds pretty much to what is there and what is possible. That's all right. They're what we call in Buddhism people very close to the actual truth. But then in other aspects of the same religion, Christianity, Islam, whatever it may be, you'll find people who in blind faith and in ignorance are completely locked up. So that is the first type of useless speech. Please think about it. We must get the right attitude here. A loving, caring, respectful attitude. But here, the main thing with all these karma teachings is for ourselves. These prayers I'm doing, this speech I'm using, is it useful or useless? If it's useless, you're wasting your time. Wasting your time. And sometimes wasting other people's times. So that's the first kind of useless speech. The second kind is chatter, just useless chatter, where we're wasting time in everyday trivial rubbish. It would be okay if we had infinite time, if life wasn't impermanent, if this precious human existence wasn't such a wonderful gift. That's not the case. Every moment of life is a gift. We must use it well. Wasting other people's time and wasting our time, wasting their time. Terrible. And the worst thing we can do is to stop people from practicing, from meditating, by keeping them there in rubbish conversation. So that's chatter. It's what most people first think of, I think, when they think of useless speech. The third sort is very important for us as practicing Buddhists. It's called true but useless speech. This is about the teachings of Dharma, which in themselves as words are true. But they're given at the wrong time, in the wrong situation, to the wrong people. Not only is it a waste of jewels of truth and a waste of their time, but it can make serious obstacles for the future. And the worst case of this is talk about voidness, about Mahamudra, about Dzogchen to people who are unprepared, who are not ready. That is a very serious, useless speech. Sometimes the intention is good, sometimes the enthusiasm is good, somebody is very... But you see, the very fact that they are giving it to people who are not ready means they haven't really understood it. Very often it means they've understood the ideas on paper, the logic of it, the beautiful words, the spiritual dohas, the wonderful texts which convey the ultimate truth, the deepest things. But to get to the deepest, highest things, we need to do lots and lots of preparation. That's like PhD stuff. And very often we're not even at the stage of really mastering the alphabet, knowing how to read and write. And that is like medieval poetry. So it's true, but useless speech. In these days, with access to so many teachings which before were secret, they were reserved only for that situation where somebody's done all of the groundwork and they're ready for it, and in a one-to-one situation the Master gives it. They were secret in that sense and kept pure. These days everything is on YouTube, it's in books, and some people get very excited about it. Again, a lot to think about here. We need to have a kind, understanding approach, but we also need to be clear and truthful. This is about speech, truth. So we have the useless speech of prayers and mantras that don't work, the useless speech which is just everyday chatter, and useless but true misuse of Dharma teachings. For the last one, the useful speech is to give Dharma teachings in the right circumstances to people at the right time, giving them what they need at that time. Not what they ask for necessarily. What they need, what is the most helpful for them. So when it comes to teaching Dharma, it's not for this particular session. There are lots of instructions, showing very clearly, carefully, how we need to choose a situation, reflect a lot beforehand, before we give a teaching to somebody. If we can, use our speech wisely. Use it when the time is right to share the precious gifts and truths of Dharma. In our own practice, not to make it mindless practice. So we're just sitting there doing the prayers, but with a distracted mind. The prayer's good in its words, but your mind is elsewhere. We need to want to make our prayers, our mantra recitation, useful for us and for everybody. I think that's enough for this particular recording. The main thing is for you to think about this, not just to watch the video and think that's it, now I've done speech karma. You have a lot to think about, but more than anything else, now that you have a few basic facts, to be much more mindful and aware as you are speaking, as you hear your family and your workers and people around you in the office and so on, speaking. Become aware of what speech is. Feel it as a power of karma. And then want to master that beautifully, so that your speech is a jewel, a gift to all sentient beings. We have a lot more to do on karma, and I look forward to speaking with you all again soon. Thank you very much. Go well. Bye-bye.